griot giant, an ode for Toni Morrison. What a privilege it must have been for you to see us the way you did. Each syllable written from your hands were necessary for us to see us. Each story constructed left trails of your audience to dream unlimited, to be unapologetically Black, beloved, for our songs to ring to the tune of Solomon, to dissect the form of the Black core, that our unique experience propels folklore. Both poetic and mythic, never as a parody, but as a griot giant thank you. 2 words, 2 syllables, too short of gratitude that you deserve. You wrote in a sediment drawl and Mississippi calligraphy that others could read, but that the culture, the diaspora could see, that the culture, that the diaspora could feel. Each syllable written was manna from your pen, a breaded inheritance being passed down to us.
The origin. Praiseworthy, a word that's prophetic to the life and legacy of Toni Morrison. Praiseworthy, ingrained in the meaning of her name, Chloe Anthony Wooford Morrison. Her genius rises from the experiences she's lived. As a child, she saw things differently, internalized experiences, and explored literature boldly. In a cold world, flowers still grow, the sun still shines, and great idiosyncratic minds are formed. Praiseworthy. This is the story of Toni Morrison.
Well, something I never really understood about Toni for her age was her supreme self-confidence. There was nothing about her that said she didn't deserve everything the world could give her.
Where she was raised, where she was born, was in Ohio. It was a steel town, multiracial, and she was very poor. But that didn't stop her from, like, some of the things that she wanted to do. She wanted to read. That was a main thing. And her grandfather, he would tell her, I can read the Bible. I've read the Bible many times. She thought that was, not, why is he telling me this? And it was because when he was growing up, he wasn't, African Americans weren't permitted to read. So it was really important for him to instill that in her. And so she realized then that words and reading had power.
She was very observant. It seems that was kind of a natural quality of hers, to pay attention to what was around her. And not to just absorb it, but to be introspective, reflective, inquisitive, and try to find a way to see meaning in what was happening in her environment.
Look, Toni Morrison was raised in Lorain, Ohio. It was a predominantly white town. And we think of places outside of the South as not often being less racist, but that's not necessarily true. She has talked about sometimes the ways in her life that race impacted her. And clearly that plays out in her writing. And it plays out, I think, in her sympathies for Black women and girls and the ways in which they are often vulnerable to society, right? I think more than anything, the best thing that ever happened to us as a people, the best thing that ever happened to American literature is that Toni Morrison paid attention to what was happening in the world around her in detail her whole life.
Them that's God shall get, them that's not shall lose. So the Bible said, and it still is news. Mama may have and Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Yes, the strong get more, while the weak ones fake. Empty pockets don't ever make the grade. Mama may have and Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own. Come round no more. Rich relations give crust of bread and such. You can help yourself, but don't you take too much. Mama may have and Papa may have, but God bless the child who can stand up and say, I've got my own. Every child's got to have his own.
The work. Her deep love and appreciation for Black culture would inspire her ambitious pursuit to ensure the Black experience was shared. She bore the responsibility of telling stories, pushing the envelope of Black fiction genre that would leave a lasting impression on the world, specifically Black girls. Her work catapulted the African American experience by inspiring tough conversations and exposing authentic stories of those who may be overlooked.
I think that Toni was certainly a very creative person, and her creativity lent a certain air to her interactions with students. She was always looking at every dimension of an interaction, and so she could be very funny. She could be incredibly stern. She was always insightful. And I think what made students grow so much through her instruction was the fact that she was fundamentally very direct with them and very truthful with them. She was a truth teller to the nth degree.
When she was fixing her kids' breakfast, she would be writing parts of stories on napkins. When she was driving in traffic, she would be writing parts of stories. I think that's the thing that students who say they are writers should ask themselves. Like, are you so meant to be a writer that you snatch every moment you can find to write? And I often ask myself, is there anything that I do in life that is so important to me that even if I have 5 seconds, I want to be doing it? I don't know that I do.
I think she was a soldier for one, the Black book that she put out. was just a historic book, the blackest of the black history book you can find. And it had all the roughness of our history from slavery, even in the Wild West, in a historical context. Books like Beloved, which tells the story of Margaret Garner, is something that people need to know about. And I applaud her for bringing that out, because Margaret Garner was an enslaved woman who got her freedom. When she was being captured, she decided to start taking the life of her own children, realizing that her children would live a better life in death than in slavery. And that's something that she captured brilliantly by telling the story of Beloved and bringing that child back as a ghost. We need that as artists. We need that type of historical information. People need to see it, and I applaud her for not being afraid to share it.
The Bluest Eye was so important because so many, even yet, so many people who are Black Americans have wanted something to be white. They wanted some way to say that they were like white people without realizing that was just the color of their skin. And I was very sorry for Piccola. I remain very sorry for the Piccolas of this world, because Piccola thought, I will be loved and I will be pretty if I had Bluest Eye, without ever realizing it's not your eyes, it's the character of the people around you.
So in many of Morrison's writing, she was looking at why is it that we have to fit into the eyes of the oppressor. And in the Bluest Eye, the standard of beauty was one that the young girl could not attain. But she, Morrison said when she was writing, how does someone feel so low about themselves, self-loathing, that the only beauty they see is in someone else?
I think Morrison knew better than anybody. The same thing that we all know is that if you look at advertisements, if you look at movies and television, if you look at the pictures on books that we give children, if you look at the pictures on the Band-Aids in the grocery store, anywhere you look, there are all these reinforcing narratives that suggest that this hair ain't good enough, right? Or this skin is not beautiful. And there have been ways in which we have all at some point in our lives tried to adhere to standards that were impossible. I think Bluest Eye, that's why it's so important for young people. Like, that's the book I recommend for young people the most. You see the most music videos and you play video games and you're on Instagram, and all of those places are saying you need to buy more hair to change yourself. You need to contour your nose to make it thinner. You need to do everything you possibly can to change yourself. What Bluest Eye helps us understand is that's not going to always be the route to happiness.
It was a judgment. And so the book is going to start really beautifully with the year that the marigolds died. And we're going to end up with, of course, Piccola's baby dying also, which is probably the better thing to have happened to the baby. But when you look at Piccola's mother, didn't like her. And she didn't like her because really she didn't like Piccola's father. And they all took it out on Piccola. And we had, Toni's use, which is so wonderful, of almost folk tales, see Dick, see Jane. And so she's going to start with that same old really stupid children's book. And we're going to end up with, and look at Piccola, who was trying, as you recall, she wanted to fly. And I always found that very interesting, because I wrote a poem called Ego Tripping. The last line says, I can fly like a bird in the sky. And so I was a little bit ahead of Toni on that one, but Toni also is going to have Piccola, who has essentially lost her mind. We're going to have her trying to fly. She wants to go to another world, another something, and she's never going to she's never going to get there because she's never going to accept herself, which she can't do because nobody around her does.
She had a perspicacity of mind that is highly unusual, really remarkable, very insightful. And I can recall reading the book that Miss Oprah Winfrey published called, it was really about her participation, her being in the movie. Beloved, was a movie. And she talks about the fact that you read and it looks like you're just kind of going along, and it's about a story about a man and a woman or some children doing this or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you start reading Toni Morrison and she just hits you. Just out of nowhere, just like bam, as they say, upside the head, in that she raises a consciousness. And you never ever, I never ever believe that I have fully understood and embraced the full message. I found myself rereading her work, and it's different. I'm sure that's because I'm more experienced, I'm more mature, I'm reading a lot of other things. In fact, I just in recent times, I thought seriously about how I drew some parallels between her work and especially the Bluest Eye and Pearl Buck's The Good Earth.
I have read my favorite Toni Morrison, which I would never discuss with her because it's not the place of a friend to discuss another friend's work. But my favorite book of hers is Sula. And when Sula tosses her hat and she leaves, I did tease Toni about that. And I said, Sula went to Fisk. And she said, I'm not sure about that. I said, you think she went to Howard because you're a Howard, but she went to Fisk. And we would laugh about that one because I'm a Fiskite and she's a Howardite. And that was about as close as we came to discussing her work. Sula is such a wonderful such a wonderful novel about friendship and how things can destroy friendship and how they have to be brought back together. And I loved it. I've read Sula, I don't know, maybe 5 times by now. And I would take it if I had to go, had opportunity to go and sit, in space station. And they said, well, you're going to go up for a year, I would take a book of poems and I would take Sula and I would read it and reread it just because the friendship of the two, Nell and Sula, and how they came together. I'd be interested in seeing what I have overlooked.
I think more than anything, what Toni Morrison did was to keep writing, right? What she did was to keep telling stories, to keep telling new stories that showed the ways that African Americans were profoundly spiritual, African Americans were profoundly intellectual. They were serious about the world around them, but they also had joy. They also laughed. They also failed, but they also succeeded. And what she did was she gave us a whole landscape of a version of Black America that we could all identify with. And if we couldn't identify, maybe we could aspire to.
My skin is black. My arms are long. My hair is woolly and my back is strong. Strong enough to take the pain inflicted again and again. What do they call me? My name is Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah. My skin yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, What do they call me? My name's Saffronia. Saffronia. Yeah. My skin is tanned. My hair is fine. My hips might invite you, daddy. My mouth like wine. Who's little girl and mine? Anyone who has money to buy. What do they call me? My name is Sweet Thing. Sweet Thing. My skin is brown. My manner is tough. I'll kill the first mother I see. Hey, my life has been rough. I'm awfully bitter these days because my parents were slaves. Ooh, what do they call me? Aunt Sarah. What do they call me? Saffronia. What do they call me? Sweet Thing. What do they call me? My name is Peaches. Yeah.
The legacy. Groundbreaking author, visionary, and storyteller. What Toni Morrison leaves behind is a trail of stories, fiction and true, that we, Black people, are here worthy of our stories being told. Humanizing melanin skin tones, transcending false narratives, just so we too can be seen. Countless awards, trailblazing souls, a praiseworthy life.
Well, when Toni first came up with the idea of the Princeton Atelier, she explained it as something that she wanted to do to make artists stretch. People become very comfortable in whatever medium they're working in, and they often really limit themselves greatly because they don't feel comfortable with people seeing them trying out new things. And so they always want to be successful, and they always want to be seen in the proper light. But she wanted to get them out of that comfort zone and ask them to do something novel, something they'd never done before, to make sure that they could discover how interesting it is to go outside of that zone where you're most comfortable.
She made the ordinary person, no matter what situation they were, whether they were good or bad, they still represented humanity. And, you know, I think that was her strength, that was her life, that was her purpose. And she did that throughout her life. She helped other writers. She helped Angela Davis. She helped Muhammad Ali. She helped other writers to express themselves. and to tell the story from their lens, not from the white perspective, but from their lens. And she was excellent at it.
I think there's a whole generation of writers, more than one at this point, who owe their very existence to Toni Morrison. For whom Toni Morrison made a kind of complicated, complex imagination of Black life possible. I think also Toni Morrison was an editor who understood writers. She worked with important writers. She also wrote her own stories. And the lesson that Toni Morrison sort of tells so many of us is that as long as you're writing, and writing is the thing that you want to do, Oprah can choose one of your books as her book club book well into a storied career. And there will be people who will have heard about you for the first time when you are a fully grown woman, when your children are grown. And people will be discovering you like it is the first time you have ever written a book. But that wasn't the important part for Toni Morrison, because she had been writing all along, which was the thing she was meant to do, right? And so the lesson of Toni Morrison is, if writing is the thing you should do it.
Oh, genius is the ability to create and imagine, or I should say maybe perhaps imagine and create. We say that, for example, Einstein was a genius because he looked up at the stars and tried to find ways to go. And nobody questioned that, though, of course, physics can never be known. We can only keep trying to find what is in the galaxy and how do we get there. We know now we can go beyond gravity, but we really don't know much more about what's out there and what it looks like. And it's really easy, especially if you read Toni's first 4 novels, the Bluest Eye, Sula, Song of Solomon, and Tar Baby. You see how she is looking at the world and how she's also looking at it honestly, but with a different eye. And as she herself liked to say, and she was, I think, quite right about that, she didn't do, you know this, she didn't do drugs. And someone asked her, it was a stupid question, of course, why don't you do drugs? She said, because whatever it is that I feel, I want to feel it, even if it's not comfortable. So it's always interesting to see how her imagination, and that is a great part of genius, is what you do with your imagination.
I was fascinated to know, well, what was it that made her so productive? It was basically one thing, and that is she got up every day and she went to her desk and she wrote. She was an amazingly well-disciplined person, and she treated it very much like a job. And I was so fascinated by this because I thought, well, that's a wonderful insight. And so if we do that with our work, if we get up every day, we pay fierce attention to it, and we just work assiduously, we can produce the same thing, right? So her house burned down one Christmas, and she rented a house temporarily when our house was being rebuilt. And when our house was ready, she moved back into her home, but she had some time left on her lease. And so she asked me if I wanted to lease her house for a time, and I agreed to do that. But part of the reason that I wanted to do it was I wanted to understand her method. And so I leased the house, and I decided to sit at the same desk where she wrote and look out over the tea roses that she looked out over, because I just knew I was going to draw some inspiration from that, and I was going to be able to produce, right? And it didn't work at all for me. And so there is an internal mechanism that she had that drove her, and that drove her to just be enormously productive. And she did that day after day, year after year, for many years. And the result of it is that she has a body of work. She and I would sometimes talk about the value of that work, And we very much disagreed about it. And that was an annoyance to her, that I did not swallow hook, line, and sinker her views on her work. But nevertheless, I was pretty strong-willed too, so I maintained that Song of Solomon was by far her greatest work. She was never persuaded enough to say that it was. She always said the last thing she wrote was her greatest work. And so I say that to say her belief in that productivity was fierce. She believed that she had yet left in her the capacity to write that greatest work. And that's what she worked on all the time, not settling for the fact that she had written The Bluest Eye or Sula or Tar Baby or Beloved, but until she died, she was working on her greatest book ever. And I think there's something in that continuing to believe that you have something extremely important to say and extremely worthwhile to create. That fueled her for the duration of her career, frankly.
The incomparable Toni Morrison is regarded as one of the most influential figures in Black fiction and American literature. Throughout the course of her storied career, she received a Pulitzer Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama. Her legacy continues to shine through generations of writers who share their stories through their cultures boldly, unapologetically, and unabashedly.
The function of freedom is to free somebody else.
If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. We died. That may be the meaning of our life.
We do language. That may be the measure of our lives.
If you surrender to the air, then you can write it.
If there's a book you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then write it.
Born on this day, February 18, 1931, the legendary, award-winning Toni Morrison, truth teller, shall forever be a guiding light of love, respect, hope, and knowledge for all people. Toni Morrison, praiseworthy woman of voice and vision,